I'm Jack Kennedy, and they hit a lot harder in my opinion too.
What is up, everybody? My name is Keelan McNamara, and everyone's got a plan until they get hit with my views.
I am Hunter Boss. He just wanted to go to the distance by the looks of it, but he couldn't even do that.
And this is the MMA Island Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MMA Island Podcast. I am Jack Kennedy alongside Keelan McNamara and Hunter Boss. We have an amazing podcast today. Bantamweight special time. We've done lightweight, welterweight, and now it's bantamweight time. And this might be our most controversial or craziest podcast yet on a division. We're so excited, and we'll get started off like usual with our top 5 fights. Hunter, get us started. What's your number 5 for your top 5 fights at bantamweight all time?
Now, when you take a look at my top 5 fights for bantamweight of all time, there's typically a little bit of a trend here. I'll see if you guys can catch it. My number 5 is Dominic Cruz versus Demetrius Johnson.
Ooh.
Now, at the time, these two were both the best of their divisions. You know, Demetrius Johnson, probably one of the best flyweights ever. And then take a look at Dominic Cruz, one of the greatest bantamweights of all time as well. These two duking it out was a fantastic fight back and forth. We saw some elite wrestling from both sides. We saw really good mixing it up. We saw good stand-up. And in the end, Dominic Cruz came out on top and showed that he is where he was supposed to be. He was the bantamweight king.
This is really funny that we're kicking this off with such a spark because my number 5 is the same. It's Dominic Cruz, Demetrius Johnson.
Let's go.
And the reason I love this fight and the reason it's my number 5 is that a lot of fans, and I suppose understandably a lot of new fans, forget how much of his career Demetrius Johnson spent at 135 amongst the best of that division. And as Hunter's just perfectly said, that fight was the best of the best facing each other. And it was a real back and forth war for 5 straight rounds. The one image that always stands out from my mind, I think they actually got a perfect photograph of it, was the German suplex Cruz got on Demetrius Johnson. That's not an easy thing to do. Demetrius Johnson's one of the best technical wrestlers out there. So it was just a back and forth war, and it cemented why Dominic Cruz went on to become as good as he did.
Yeah, that was absolutely amazing. I'm sticking with the Dominic Cruz fight as well. I'm going different, though. Already different from you guys, but it's all right. Cruz versus Garbrandt is my number 5. Now, this fight was interesting for so many reasons, and we actually kind of talked about it off air. I think it was the last podcast before when we were talking about this. And it was such a big moment in the bantamweight division because Dominic Cruz is one of the most dominant champions the UFC has ever seen. Not just the bantamweight division, the UFC has ever seen. And he is one of those guys whose style is nearly untouchable. What Garbrandt did that night was incredible. He flipped the script. He was the guy that was untouchable. He was dodging all of Dominic Cruz strikes while landing heavy shots on him. It was crazy to watch and one of the best bantamweight fights of all time.
Yeah, no, I love that fight a lot. But my number 4 right here might be a little different from a lot of people's. I would go Pedro Munoz versus Cody Garbrandt.
Ooh.
Now, I know this fight didn't last a super long time, but those last 10 seconds of the fight was absolute insanity. They were throwing hooks until one of them was going to drop. They knew they were not going to stop trading in that phone booth until one of them was on the ground not breathing, you know? And then sadly, it was Cody Garbrandt that was the loser in that fight, but it blew so many people's minds to even think that Pedro Munoz could knock out Cody Garbrandt, though he was knocked out from TJ Dillashaw from those previous fights. Other than that, Cody Garbrandt looked unstoppable, you know, at this time. Pedro Munoz goes in and proves everyone wrong and was an absolute amazing last 10 seconds of that fight.
Dude, what a killer fight. I'm still getting flashbacks to that bloody stunning exchange. Insane memories. Anyway, moving on very quickly before I get too excited about that. My number 4, Dominic Cruz, Uriah Faber 2.
Ooh,
UFC 132. This fight was very important for a lot of reasons, especially to the hardcore and the very well-established MMA fans. For those of you who experienced the WEC days, you'll remember Dominic Cruz's only loss coming to Uriah Faber. And a lot of people felt, even though Uriah Faber was the best bantamweight in the world, that it came against it was almost a step up for Dominic Cruz too soon. He was too inexperienced. And so when this fight came around, everybody knew this was going to happen because it was sort of like the old lion facing the young, hungry newcomer, and that's exactly the way the fight turned out in the end. Dominant, obliterating display from Dominic Cruz. And I've picked this fight at number 4 because I really felt it was a changing of the guard. And to me, this was really the signpost fight for the rise of Dominic Cruz and going into superstardom and becoming as good as he did. So that's why I have that fight at number 4.
Yeah, I like that fight a lot. Both of those fights are amazing. I'm sticking with Dominic Cruz again at my number 4, and this one I'm going TJ Dillashaw, Dominic Cruz. One of the closest and most controversial fights in bantamweight history. Obviously, Dominic Cruz was coming back. He had just knocked out Tagayo Mizugaki really quickly, which is something he really doesn't do. He doesn't finish fights that fast, but he did it, and that looked like a real resurgence of Dominic Cruz after being stripped from the title and all the mess that had happened in that weird zone when he was hurt for a long time. Then you have TJ Dillashaw, the new champion, just coming off those finishes and stuff. It's like TJ Dillashaw's the guy, and two styles that are both so technical but so fantastic to watch. So we knew we were going to get a good fight out of it, and it really delivered. Very close fight. People still argue about it today. I do agree with the decision. Dominic Cruz got the victory, but a fight that will be remembered in history for the bantamweight division.
Yeah, that is it's one of my favorite fights just to watch. My number 3, though, is one that's already been mentioned, Dominic Cruz versus Cody Garbrandt.
Yep.
This fight changed everything. Dominic Cruz, up until this point, was seen as the greatest bantamweight champion we've ever seen in the UFC. He's the only bantamweight champion anyone's ever really seen. And Dominic Cruz goes out there with a young up-and-coming Cody Garbrandt who fights out of Team Alpha Male, the team that Dominic Cruz actually absolutely despises. And he goes out there and mops the floor with Dominic Cruz. No one's really done that. I know Henry Cejudo got that TKO stoppage, but it was controversial and he was standing up. But Cody Garbrandt, on the other hand, knocked him down at least 3 times in that fight and then goes on to start dancing in the middle of the fight, really showboating. And it was just no one's ever done that against Dominic Cruz. And no one, I don't think, ever will again because Cody Garbrandt is that special of a fighter. So that's number 3, Dominic Cruz versus Cody Garbrandt.
Man, I wish I could dance as good as Cody Garbrandt. I really can't.
While dodging a strike, yeah,
robot and that. What a fantastic fight it really was, and you may see it later on in my list. You may not. Who knows? But my number 3 is actually a fighter nobody's mentioned yet. It's Renan Barão and TJ Dillashaw.
It's a good fight.
Yep.
And I really don't think this fight needs much introduction. Renan Barão, one of the greatest bantamweights we've ever seen, a dominant champion. Coming into this fight, he was on a 32-fight winning streak. Let that sink in for a second before I go any further. 32 professional fights, including multiple title defenses. And then you have TJ Dillashaw, who comes in as a massive betting underdog, and he absolutely destroys Renan Barão for 5 rounds, and then he obliterates him and finishes him in the 5th. I mean, everybody knows my feelings on TJ Dillashaw. I think that's pretty clear, but this Dillashaw was almost untouchable. He went in, he mopped the floor with a great Renan Barão, and it was just a hammering from beginning to end, and it's worthy of being in the top 5.
Yeah, absolutely great shout, man. That fight was so insane on so many levels, because no one expected TJ Dillashaw to do anything in there. Renan Barão was the guy. He was so dominant and doesn't get enough credit for what he did in his career because he was the interim champion. He was only champion for 1 or 2 fights. He was the interim champion for so many while Dominic Cruz was injured. The UFC would never do that today, that long of a period without a champion. But that fight was absolutely incredible and another changing of the guard. I'm going to go ahead, and this is an odd one. I guarantee you guys don't have this on your list, but I remember this vividly. It was a fight night, John Lineker versus Francisco Rivera. This fight lasted 1 round, and it was 30 seconds long, but it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. They both went out there, all out brawl. John Lineker got the submission win just from absolutely obliterating each other. It was one of they blitzed each other. It was insane. It's one of those 1-round wars that will go on. It almost won Fight of the Year in 2015. As it should, even though it only lasted a minute 30 seconds. It was incredible. Blink and you miss it kind of fight. Both sprinted out there, and I have it on my list at number 3.
That's a great shout. I almost forgot about that. It reminds me a lot of the Paul Daly Nick Diaz fight.
Yeah.
When I watched that, I
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
mad flashbacks to that one.
Exactly what I was just
Yep.
thinking.
But my number 2 was already mentioned, but it's Dominic Cruz versus TJ Dillashaw. Once again, one of the most controversial fights, and a lot of people would see. It was fantastic to watch because Dominic Cruz was on injury leave for so long. I think he was suffering the loss, or no, he's just on injury leave for a long time, and he comes back, and we've seen this young, hungry TJ Dillashaw. And we're all thinking, okay, TJ Dillashaw, he's the newcomer. I think he's going to be doing pretty well against old man Dominic Cruz. No, Dominic Cruz goes out there and shows TJ Dillashaw that he can keep up with everything he can do, and on top of it, do more. He went out there, he mixed in the takedowns, he mixed in his strikes like he usually does. He had his fantastic combinations and ended up winning. And it was such a controversial fight. And since it's a controversial fight, it's a good fight. It's like it could have gone either way. So you love those type of fights because you can keep talking about them for the years to come. So that's why I have that at number 2.
Yeah, just killer fights. Not much more to say than that. My number 2 is Cody Garbrandt, Dominic Cruz. And there's so many reasons this fight's important. Most of them have been covered excellently by you two already. This fight to me was the dawning of a new era. And we said in the last episode, there's certain moments we're grateful for where it feels like we're a part of history. This fight was one of them.
Yeah.
Dominic Cruz, greatest of all time in the very large majority of people's eyes. And not many people gave Cody Garbrandt much of a chance coming into this fight. I remember it very clearly. People saying, all he can do is throw hands. He's going to have to knock out Dominic Cruz. Incorrect. Try again. Try a 5-round hammering of the greatest bantamweight there's ever been. And, it's one thing to hammer a fighter. It's another thing to beat them so well and dance in the middle of it and just break someone's soul over 5 rounds. And you can tell no one's ever done that to Dominic Cruz, and no one will ever do it to Dominic Cruz again. He's getting punched. He can take punches. He's as tough as they come. But when you see his shots so flailing and almost, Garbrandt getting out of the way so effortlessly, you can see in Cruz's eyes, he knows he's in there with a different beast. And you can tell that it's the passing of the torch to the new era of bantamweights. So not only was it one of the greatest individual performances of all time, but the symbolic importance on many levels almost supersedes the individual performance. And, just one of the greatest bantamweight fights there's ever been, and one of the greatest there ever will be.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And, also Cruz was coming off of that dominant performance over Uriah Faber for the 3rd time, where he just absolutely destroyed him. So this was not an old man Cruz that he beat. This was a dominant champion, Dominic Cruz, that he legitimately beat. I'd argue the Cejudo Cruz, that fight was not necessarily the best version of Dominic Cruz we will ever see.
Yeah.
But Cody Garbrandt definitely beat a legitimate Dominic Cruz, and that was insane. I am going to go with another Cody Garbrandt fight for my number 2. This one is Dillashaw versus Garbrandt, the first one. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy revolving around this fight, but this fight was incredible. The build-up to it and everything. UFC 217, I will remember it forever, the GSP fight. And this was just to kick off the card right after Thug rose over Joanna, and it's just like nothing can top that. Well, then this fight topped that. It was incredible. The hatred they had for each other really boiled over into the fight and made the fight just unbelievable to watch. It was incredible. Obviously, Garbrandt almost got the finish in the first. TJ came back and won by that finish. No matter all the circumstances were going around that fight and everything, and after the fight that we know, that fight still is incredible. And it was such an amazing moment, and just the pure. It's what you love in MMA, just the chaos of it and just the crazy back and forth. I love it, and it's one of my personal favorite fights. So yeah, that's my number 2.
One of my favorite images, especially from that fight, is just at the end of the fight when TJ Dillashaw gets off of Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt stands back up immediately, almost to protest the fight, and then TJ kind of walks up to him and like screams into his face. You kind of see like the bloody, terrified look of Cody Garbrandt. He's like, oh, that's just Love that image. I love Cody Garbrandt, but I love that image as well. And at number one, how can you not put it at number one? It's been mentioned already, but Dominic Cruz versus Uriah Faber too. Like, this fight wasn't as dominant, I think, as you guys remember. Like, this fight was back and forth for those earlier rounds, and then when it came to the championship rounds, we were proven to see that Dominic Cruz was the champion. You know, him suffering his first loss to Uriah Faber, both of them coming in. We see fantastic trash talk throughout this entire fight. And can I just say, Dominic Cruz has some of the best trash talk ever out of all these fighters.
Most intelligent, no question.
Exactly. It goes so under the radar because it's not just cursing. It's not just like, you suck, your mom sucks, that type of stuff. No, it's clever. You think about it. Like, I remember one of the quotes, I think it was for the Garbrandt fight, but it was the money I made off of beating your team bought me my first house. And I will always remember that quote because it is so clever. It's just so thought of, and it's so true. You know, it's just Dominic Cruz, definitely one of the best of all time. If you take a look at my top 5, Dominic Cruz is 4 out of the 5. And for a good reason. Uriah Faber 2 against Dominic Cruz was an amazing fight.
Yeah, just before I move on to number one of my favorite Dominic Cruz quotes, because it feels like the appropriate time to say it, actually the Dillashaw fight too, when they're both in the video for the UFC media, and Dillashaw says, "I'm done talking to you. You can't be done talking to me. You're sat right next to me. You can't go anywhere, dummy." Genius. Yeah. Genius Dominic Cruz, and I respect it on many levels. And this is not going to be any shock. Dominic Cruz is in my number one, and it is a fight that's been mentioned already. It's Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw. I would argue that Cody Garbrandt fought a better, healthier version of Dominic Cruz than TJ Dillashaw did that night. This was the Cruz that was coming off a vicious injury that kept him out for such a long time. He obviously got the knockout win over Matsugati, I think it was, before this Dillashaw fight, but it was still a warm-up fight. It wasn't the caliber of Dillashaw at that time. And it was just the greatest bantamweight fight of all time, in my opinion. Exchanging from minute 1 to minute 25. You know, the takedowns were in there, the scramble was there, the striking was there. And in my opinion, I agree with Jack. I think the right decision was reached in the end. But again, this fight is so much more than the sum of its parts. The significance was so important because it felt like the present / past meeting the future, and the present won out. And justifiably so. You know, Dillashaw gave it everything he got, and it still wasn't enough to beat the wily athleticism and ability of Dominic Cruz. So for me, and again, I have no issue with any of those other fights being at number one because they're all fantastic on their own merits. But for me, just the symbolism and the time and the place and all the parts coming together, Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw is number one for me.
That is a great pick. But Hunter, you are correct. The best bantamweight fight of all time, Uriah Faber versus Dominic Cruz 2. It was back and forth. It was pretty crazy. It went to a decision, and there were some people calling it for Uriah Faber, the vast majority for Cruz. But it was a crazy fight, and this was, yes, an older Uriah Faber, but I would still argue with Uriah Faber that was still in his prime against a Dominic Cruz that was just entering his prime. And so these are two guys at the top of their game. And you have all the bad blood. This is one of the original bad blood stories in the UFC, and it's between not only the Dominic Cruz and Uriah Faber, but between their entire camps as well, with all the history that they've had. And it's just amazing that it boiled over. Obviously, the first fight that happened in the WEC was one of the most important in bantamweight history, not only UFC history, but bantamweight history, when Uriah Faber got that win. But the second fight, Cruz was the champion, and Uriah Faber's challenging for it. And Cruz won out. It was amazing, that back and forth, just everything that went into it. You talk about modern rivalries and everything. I would say this fight could arguably be the start of modern rivalries in the UFC. This bantamweight fight between Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz. The rivalry will live on forever. The fight itself will live on forever. And for me, it is the greatest bantamweight fight of all time. Yeah. All right, guys. So we didn't do this for the 155 breakdown, but we're doing it now. It's all right. What is your Mount Rushmore, starting with number 4, for the bantamweight division?
My number 4 would have to be TJ Dillashaw. Though he's very much disliked right now in the MMA community. He still is one of the best fighters we've ever seen in this division. The way he can mix it up in the octagon and the way he was trained at Team Alpha Male and the history behind everything that happened with him, and he goes in there and he really does put on a performance for almost every single one of his fights. He's really fun to watch. He's got great striking, good knockout power, fantastic wrestling. He's the whole package when it comes to fighting. And though right now he was on the leave for all the PED issues and whatnot, and like illegal drugs caught in his system. That's why he's ranked at the bottom of my Mount Rushmore. It's because you can't really have someone like even on the top or even close to the top 2 with those drug charges. So I'm gonna go ahead and put him at number 4.
Yeah, my number 4 is actually joint, which is interesting because I could very much justify one over the other. They're pretty interchangeable, and they're very different because they're from the WEC. It's Miguel Torres and Brian Bulls.
Wow.
Yeah, I think these guys get unfairly overlooked quite a lot, and they get overlooked by the likes of your Cruzes and your Fabers and so on and so forth. But these guys were the staple of the WEC back in the day. Just go back and watch some of their fights. Like, one of my favorite fights of all time from the WEC is Brian Bulls and Dominic Cruz.
Yeah.
I think it was an insane fight, and it was so unfortunate Brian Bulls broke his hand in the first round. I actually think it was the first shot he threw in the first exchange. Just such awful luck. But both of these guys were just on an absolute tear through the WEC. Miguel Torres as well. Sadly, they both faded a bit out of the scene after that. I think the Dominic Cruz win did affect Brian Bulls quite a lot, and he was never the same again. But both guys, they never really get the credit they deserve, in my opinion. And I certainly think they should be recognized, and their records speak for themselves in that regard alone. So one or both of them, they're on my number 4 for the Mount Rushmore of bantamweights.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I really like that's a good shout from WEC because they need recognition a lot because a lot of the bantamweight history is not in the UFC. A lot of it was from the WEC. So I was thinking about this one, and I will have Dillashaw in my Mount Rushmore once he gets a win in the UFC again, clean, because he needs to be, right? Everything he's done, he needs to be. But for the sake of this, and since why not? Let's all have 3 different people to start it off. I'm gonna go Uriah Faber to start off my Mount Rushmore. And yes, he was never a UFC champion, but he's one of those guys that was one of the best to ever not win a UFC belt. And obviously he was a WEC champion as well. Everything he did, he was just that contender that it's just awkward because you don't really know what to do with, because every time he would get a title shot, he would lose, but he would beat everybody else. He was that odd one out, like Joseph Benavidez to Demetrius Johnson for a while at 125. So it's an awkward position, but he is one of the founding members of this weight class, and obviously the rivalry he's had with Dominic Cruz will go down forever. The fights he's had with so many will go down forever. And so he is, even though he never became UFC champion, for me, he has to start off my Mount Rushmore.
That's a good shout. It's a good shout. And it's funny because I'm actually going to put him at number 3, my Uriah Faber. Yeah. So all the reasons you said are the reasons I have as well. He was champion in the WEC. He was a very good fighter. And he was like the definition of a gatekeeper, No one shall pass this line. I will beat everyone, but I will simply lose to the champion every single time. He had the most UFC title chances to get the title, most title challenges out of any other UFC fighter. And that's not because of just his name alone. He beats everyone he can. And then he loses to the best. It really is sad to see it, but he never secured that UFC title, which really does suck a lot for Uriah Faber. But he really did. He should be proud of the achievements he had in his career, because he turned out to be a fantastic fighter, and he's also a really good coach now too. He's been coaching everyone at Team Alpha Male, and his legacy will keep riding throughout all these new fighters. So Uriah Faber is definitely a big part of bantamweight history, and that is why I have him at number 3.
Yeah, I love Uriah Faber a lot. And my number 3, I was actually very torn on it. And it was really a last minute decision for who I put on. And it's actually not Uriah Faber. And I understand this might generate quite a bit of controversy, but there's a lot of factors that I'll explain as to why he's number 3. My number 3 is Cody Garbrandt.
Wow.
And as I said, there's quite a few reasons for this. First of all, Cody Garbrandt, to the best of my knowledge, is still on the right side of 30. And look at what he's achieved already. So Cody Garbrandt has got a good 7 or 8 years left in the gas tank if he wants to keep it going that long. He's, in my opinion, he's probably the best pure boxer at 135, and he's a nightmare for anybody who he fights. Now, of course, that feeds into my other reason. I think it's at least 95% likely that Garbrandt will be champion again in the next 2-3 years. You know, he's just too good. And once he gets his head right and he fights everybody the way he did against Dominic Cruz, he's more than good enough to beat all of them. And that is my honest opinion. And Cruz feeds into my third reason for why he's number 3. To many people, and I'm sure to arguably us as well, Dominic Cruz is the greatest 135er to ever put on a pair of gloves. And look at what Cody Garbrandt did to that number 1. Not only to the number 1, but to a very healthy number 1 too. You know, Dominic Cruz had barely, I mean, with the exception of the likes of Dillashaw, he'd barely broken a sweat in the majority of his career. And he went out and got ragdolled by Cody Garbrandt for 5 rounds straight. The boxing, the movement, everything we've already described. And personally, I think dismantling the GOAT puts you on the Mount Rushmore of GOATs alone, but the nature of the win and the longevity of his career still to go, I feel it's justified putting him a little higher up.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting one. I'm not sure I agree with you on it. I'm on the, you made a point about him being young. I'm on the other side of that. I think he's too young to be on it yet. I mean, he was a champion, but he never defended his belt against, his first defense was against TJ Dillashaw.
Let's not go into this now, Jack.
I'm just saying, yes, that was a cheat, but he didn't win that fight even still. So he needs to do more. He needs to do more for me, and then we'll go on to it. But speaking of that, a guy that I personally love and love to watch, but doesn't get hardly any credit from anybody, is Renan Barão, and that is my number 3 on this Mount Rushmore. And I have up all of his record right here, and Keelan mentioned it. He was on a 32 fight win streak before he lost to TJ Dillashaw in that fight. 32 fights. No wonder he wasn't taking him seriously. Before he just TKO'd Uriah Faber, and we mentioned how good Uriah Faber was just a minute ago. Renan Barão is one of the best bantamweight champions to ever do it, and technically he was one of the best. He is probably the best interim champion in UFC history. He went on so many wins as the interim champion, just waiting for Dominic Cruz to get better, and Dominic Cruz never did. I think it was 2.5, maybe 3 years he was interim champion, and then they gave him the belt. He defended the belt once or twice, and then lost to TJ Dillashaw. So it's a very short title reign technically, but it was a very long title reign whenever you consider the interim belt, and I count that because he did kind of get screwed out of being the champion whenever Dominic Cruz was hurt. Because that's the first time you've really seen it in UFC history where you have that champion that's been the champion, but it's hurt and can't compete. So what do you do with that situation? The UFC won't make that mistake again. But I don't count that against him. Renan Barão went on so many wins, beat so many guys. Uriah Faber, Eddie Wineland, in one of the craziest knockouts you will ever see, in that spinning side kick that landed to the head. Michael McDonald was very good. Uriah Faber twice. Scott Jorgensen, Brad Pickett, fight of the night. Just so many fights. You go back and further back, and you still look at everything. Unfortunately, his career after that TJ Dillashaw lost kind of unraveled, but I don't hold that against him. One of the best bantamweight champions to ever do it. Renan Barão, number 3 on my list.
Yeah, no, that's a good shout. I love his dance he does at the end of the Eddie Wineland knockout. But my number 2 is definitely going to spark some controversy here. I'm going to have Cody Garbrandt at number 2. He is so young, but he has such a good career ahead of him. And I'm just thinking 10 years down the line, who are we going to remember the most in the bantamweight? That's going to be Dominic Cruz at number 1. I think it's kind of obvious what my number 1 is.
We don't know that yet.
We don't know anything. But who dismantled Dominic Cruz? That's Keelan put it best. Who dismantled Dominic Cruz? That's Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt was 11-0 when he did this. He had 11 fights. I mean, he had 32. He was 32-1 pure boxing record, amateur boxing record, and he definitely is one of the best boxers in the UFC currently. Like, we take a look at Dustin Poirier, we take a look at Max Holloway, and then I'd say right under there, is Cody Garbrandt. You know, Cody Garbrandt just absolutely knows how to dismantle his opponents. He has all the tools that he needs. I'd say he's probably the fastest 135er currently on the whole roster. I think there's no one who can throw as fast as he can and still pack that much of a punch when he throws that strike. He's got a laser beam right hand. He has all the abilities he needs to do. He's got good wrestling. He can scramble. He's got everything he needs. All he needs right now is just kind of to keep his emotions in check, which I think he can work on pretty easily when it comes to fighting. I think we already saw it a little bit in the Rafael Assunção fight. Like we saw, there was plenty of opportunities where he could have gone into a war where he could have just thrown hooks. He didn't though. He kept his head on tight. And he's also brings in those pay-per-view buys as well. You know, when you see Cody Garbrandt, you see dancing, you see knockouts, you see ups, you see downs. He's a fantastic fighter to watch, and that's why I have him at number 2.
Yep, and he's a Golden Gloves champion as well.
Yeah,
amateur boxing career. I mean, I love Cody. We all do. But
linebacker for Ohio. I mean, not Ohio State, but like high school. He played linebacker. Crazy.
No way.
Yeah, he weighed 155 pounds or 160 pounds, and he was a linebacker. It was insane.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Jack, me and you are actually thinking along similar lines because Henan Barao is my number 2.
Wow, I like it. I like it a lot.
Henan Barao needs to borrow Cody Garbrandt's nickname because my man gets no love. And he certainly does not get enough love when it comes to the GOAT conversation.
Yes.
I mean, again, I'm going to say this for a second, and people need to dwell on this because this is hugely important, especially in modern mixed martial arts. 32 fight win streak. We're probably never going to see that again from anyone. 32 fights. That's the most ridiculous winning streak you could come up with. And he fought some of the most legit killers he could. Jack read out his resume perfectly a minute ago. And, you know, Henan Barao, just that beautiful kickboxing style as well. He would go out, he'd dismantle his opponents. Most of them were beaten before he even went into the octagon because they knew what was going to happen to them. Uriah Faber TKO'd him, one of the best knockouts in history over Eddie Wineland. Like Jack said, a spinning sidekick that caught Eddie Wineland in his head, and he was in the shadow realm from that insane knockout. And Henan Barao just gets nowhere near enough love that he should. I think he's overlooked too much by the Dillashaw loss. And of course, he did go, I believe it's 2-8 after the Dillashaw loss. And that is a real shame. But as we've said, some fights just change you. That's the nature of the game. But his 32 fight win streak should always be remembered far more than one loss. And it should always carry him in far greater stead than any of his losses ever will. Henan Barao, you are a very worthy number 2.
I love it. And thank you for giving him respect because he needs it. Okay. I'm nervous for this one. You guys are going to hate me for this. All right. I, at my number 2, have Henry Cejudo. All right. Now, hear me out. All right. Yes, he only had a couple fights at bantamweight, but how dominant was he in those fights? He was so dominant. I am not. Yes, he had 2 fights, but those were 2 bantamweight fights. One was against Marlon Moraes, where he won. And Marlon Moraes, he really derailed a lot of his career. Marlon Moraes going into that, coming off that big knockout over Aljamain Sterling and just decimating everyone, weathered the storm, came back and won that. Then, okay, the Dominic Cruz fight is up in there because I do think the Dominic Cruz, that fight was kind of booked just because there was no one readily available. But that was still a win over Dominic Cruz nonetheless. If he had continued fighting, I think he is one of the most well-rounded guys in the UFC and that the UFC has ever seen. Coming up from flyweight to bantamweight, he looked better at bantamweight, in my opinion. I think he was just getting going. I do think he is up there for one of the best bantamweight fighters of all time. Despite barely fighting at bantamweight, I think if he continued to fight, he would have built up his resume. And those are still 2 title fight wins. Those are not just 2 random wins. Those are 2 title fight wins over 2 of the best bantamweights that we've seen, one of all time and one in recent times. So that's why I have Henry Cejudo at number 2. If TJ Dillashaw, whenever he wins, I might bump him out. We'll see. Right now, I have Henry Cejudo number 2, and I'm okay with it. I don't have Cody Garbrandt in there. I'm not writing that Cody Garbrandt. I love Cody Garbrandt, but I'm not putting him in the GOAT conversation at bantamweight right now. I'm staying out of that. I know I'm a 2-1 right here, but I'm sticking with that. I'm sticking with that.
Okay, brave. That's all I gotta say. You
You guys are coming to kill me right now. I know.
I can't say that I agree with that.
I'm on the way.
And I wouldn't even call both.
I'll see
I
you in
wouldn't
7
call
minutes.
the Marlon Moraes dominant. That first round he almost
Well, he came back from
he escaped
adversity.
with his
That's what I'm
teeth. Yeah,
saying.
He came back
from
and won.
adversity.
Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. Henry Cejudo is definitely one of the best to do it at flyweight. But when it comes down to bantamweight, I don't know if I agree. But fair enough. My number one, Dominic Cruz. What else is there to say?
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, am I,
That's shocking.
Yeah, no, crazy. No, he's he had the title for the longest time. He was the first ever bantamweight champion. They started the weight division basically to give it to Dominic Cruz, and kind of same way they started flyweight to give it to Demetrius Johnson. Dominic Cruz went out there and he showed that he can do it all. He's got such an interesting style. When I look at him, it kind of reminds me of Muhammad Ali, where you can't hit what you can't see. You will go in there, you go in and out of the pocket, you do your dips and ducks, you go in for the takedown, and then after that you do the same dip and duck, and then go for a left and right hook. He's got a style that you can't predict, and only a few fighters can follow along. We've only seen 2 fighters in the octagon really be able to catch on to what Dominic Cruz does. One of those being Henry Cejudo. Don't get me wrong, but really Dominic Cruz just shows that he goes out there and he does what he can. He is an incredibly smart fighter. He knows when to go for those takedowns. He knows when he's losing the fights, and he knows that he needs to do something to get us started. He's very well. He's very well composure. He can talk very well. We see him as a commentator, and we really do see him as a really good role model to look up to. He does great things outside of fighting, and that's why he's my number one.
Right, my number one, the greatest bantamweight of all time, of any time, is Hyoji Koreguchi.
Of course.
Oh,
I'm joking.
It was either that or Dominic Cruz. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah,
please don't hit me, people.
No,
it's Dominic Cruz. Probably not much of a shock. Certainly not as much of a shock as our welterweight episode. It just is Dominic Cruz. Dominic Cruz, if you trace the DNA of 135, Dominic Cruz is the bantamweight division, and he was the backbone of the bantamweight division for years. I mean, pretty much up until the Cody Garbrandt fight, he was that division. We could break down his style and his impact for probably an hour on its own. But if you look at the fusion of wrestling with pure striking, I've never seen a hybrid like it that meshes so cleanly together. And that's what Hunter was saying about how it's so difficult to fight him, because you don't know what's coming next. Where someone would throw a hook, he might go for a single leg. Where someone would go for a takedown, he might throw that really unorthodox right hook at that weird angle that he throws. There's no real antidote to Dominic Cruz's style, because it is his style. He pretty much created his own style so no one else could dance along to the beat, and that was the core of his success, and it was genius. No one could figure out the rhythm, and certainly no one could crack the code until, of course, Cody Garbrandt did. But Dominic Cruz will go down as the greatest bantamweight of all time, wholly deservedly so too. I mean, if you look at my top 5 bantamweight fights of all time, Dominic Cruz is involved in 80% of them. Yeah. And that just tells you the impact this man has. And people forget as well how much of a box office draw Dominic Cruz was too. Right. That cerebral trash talk that, Dominic Cruz was so refreshing, because we were used to, the Ken Shamrocks beat you to the living death kind of crap from the 90s, that sort of trash talk. Dominic Cruz was the first real fighter, to me, even before the Chael Sonnens and around the time of the Bispings, to actually break an opponent down intelligently. And whenever fight fans saw this, because fight fans have never really seen this before in mixed martial arts, they thought, hang on, this is really, really good. This isn't just some, like you said, Jack, and you're absolutely right. This wasn't just, oh, your mom this, and, I'm going to do this and that. This was actually really, really intelligent, psychological destruction. And it worked because his opponents didn't have anything to go back at him with. And he had most of his opponents beaten, humiliated before they actually got into the fight. So Dominic Cruz, you're the number one, and I really don't think it's even close.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be Dominic Cruz, right? I mean, we've all had some interesting picks on this Mount Rushmore conversation, but legitimately, if you had anyone other than Dominic Cruz at number one, you're wrong. Dominic Cruz is the greatest bantamweight of all time. Like you guys already said, he helped shape the division. I really can't even add too much more on to what you guys say because you nailed it. His style is what I'll talk about, just like Keelan did. Just so odd and weird. It's not he never really circling in one direction. He's always changing, and his feet are always moving. That's why his knees have had so many problems, because his style relies so much on that lateral movement and just getting out of the way of everything. He is the definition of untouchable when it comes to the UFC. So many have tried. You could tell TJ Dillashaw, even though that fight was very close, was struggling to get a punch on Dominic Cruz, and that was not Dominic Cruz at his best either. And that's just showing you how intense and how good Dominic Cruz is. And again, restating what you guys said too, he's in basically all of my greatest fights of all time at bantamweight as well. There's just a certain, and those are because those are the greatest fights, but also because there's a certain hype behind Dominic Cruz. You have to watch it. The guy, the uniqueness to his style, the trash talk, everything surrounding it, just all builds up into what is an amazing fight. And what he did for the bantamweight division will carry miles. And so Dominic Cruz, rightfully number one on the list, on all of our lists. And with that, let's go ahead and move into probably the moment where the most controversy will happen, our rankings, current UFC rankings for the UFC's bantamweight division, starting with number 10. Hunter, get us started.
We're going to go with the Sugar Show, Sean O'Malley.
Wow.
Sean O'Malley.
Okay.
Now, he is currently not ranked in the UFC. He is not even number 15. He's past it. But I think Sean O'Malley is one of the best prospects we've seen in the UFC for such a long time. He did have that scary loss to Chito Vera, where he did roll his ankle, but I feel like we didn't see Sean O'Malley at his best at that time. He did roll, he rolled the ankle himself, though Chito Vera did have those leg kicks to kind of set up the rolling of the ankle. That's still, I wouldn't say that's 100% all on Chito Vera, who won that fight. I think there's definitely some pre-existing things that went into that fight. He was like 4 fights in that year. He was brittle, but right now he's looked better than we've seen in a long time. That Thomas Almeida knockout, amazing. Those Eddie Wineland knockouts, amazing. And then what he did on the Contender Series, he blew up the Contender Series. He made it what it is. And I just feel like he definitely has the potential to be higher on this list if he faces a ranked opponent here soon. I think his next fight is not even against a ranked fighter as well. So maybe the fight after that, we could see if he truly belongs where I say he is. But that's my number 10, Sugar Sean O'Malley.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And good Lord Almighty, my list is going to cause some controversy.
I know. I'm waiting for it, man. I'm waiting for it.
There are gonna be Zoom fights here off camera. Don't worry about it. Now, my number 10 is actually Merab Dvalishvili. I believe he's ranked number 10 actually in the UFC's official rankings, and I think that's the perfect position for him. He's on a 5-fight win streak, as far as I know, and I think that's his perfect positioning right now. He's just an all-round rock-solid fighter, and he will move up the rankings at least 2 or 3 positions pretty soon, I feel. So Merab Dvalishvili is my number 10.
You were setting it up like you were going to say someone crazy at number 10. I was
getting
ready for it.
Just wait.
It's the guy who's still there.
All right. Now, okay, if you won't do it, I will. Frank Yeager, number 10 for me.
Oh, okay.
Very, very low. But I do think with reason. It was a questionable split decision over Pedro Munoz. Now, I do agree with it, but it was a split decision. It was very close. People were arguing for Munoz in that fight. Then to get completely decimated by Corey Sandhagen in a fight that I don't think should have been booked. Frank Yeager, I think that just kind of proved the last stamp that almost put out his title hopes for that division and being super high ranked in that division. So when you look at him compared to all of the up and coming guys in that division that are ranked right now, because it's one of the most stacked divisions in the UFC, I just can't put him ahead of anybody. But he is still top 10. So number 10, Frank Yeager for me.
Jack, you are a madman, but I somewhat agree with you. At number 9, I have Frank Yeager.
I gotta start off.
Number 9, I have Frank Yeager.
All right.
It's not too much different, for the same reasons you said.
Yeah.
Pedro Munoz, split decision, though he did come out on top. I do agree that he did win that fight. He goes on to get completely knocked out cold by Corey Sandhagen, proving that he should be nowhere near the top 5 right now. And he needs to start fighting some more contenders to see if he should even belong in the top 10. That's why I have number 9, Frankie Edgar.
Yeah, my number 9 is a couple of spots higher from where he actually is, but my number 9's Rafael Assunção.
Okay.
And, I just think he's a really, really good fighter. Obviously he was on the wrong end of a career lasting highlight when he got blasted into outer space by Cody Garbrandt. But sorry, I'm just such a beautiful knockout. But unfortunately, he was on the wrong end of it. But he's 32-7 as far as I know, and that's a fantastic record to have. And it speaks to the caliber of opponents that he faces. And I think, given his activity and given how good of a fighter he always has been, Rafael Assunção is worthy of being in the top 10.
I like it. I had him at 11 just because he hasn't been on the most spectacular form as of late, but he could definitely crack it really soon. I think he needs to get another higher ranked opponent. At number 9 for me, Merab Dvalishvili, just like Keelan said, we just saw him fight recently. Another guy from Georgia, just going to rise in the rankings. I think he has all the potential in the world. Hasn't faced the top contenders yet, but he's getting there. And I think a couple more fights and he will just continue to climb the rankings. He has a great style for bantamweight. So for that, I have Merab at number 9.
That's crazy because my number 8 is Merab. I like
Merab
a lot. He's got such a great ability when you step in the octagon. You see his pressure, and that pressure really comes out, and it develops so fast into the fight. It swarms his opponents when it comes to wrestling, when it comes to striking. He holds unbelievable knockout power, and he's just such a fantastic fighter to watch while you're in there too. I think he'll only get better in his career, so I think we're going to have him at 8 for now. But ask me again in another 3 years, he'll probably be in the top 5, if not champion. I think this fighter is so fantastic, and he's so good, and he's so overlooked too. So soon in this career, he's going to be higher, but right now I have my number 8.
It's really weird. We have most of the same fighters around the 10 to 8 position. My number 8 is Frankie Edgar.
Okay.
And again, I'm not mad at moving him back even one. I think your arguments are very good. What sways it for me for Edgar is even at this late stage in his career, he should have gotten a decision win over a very game Pedro Munoz, even when you consider the wars and the brutality he's been through. I almost consider the Corey Sandhagen fight a write-off because I fully agree with Jack, and we've talked about this a bit before, all three of us. That fight should never have been booked to begin with. It didn't make any sense on any level. So if we take that fight with Pedro Munoz in isolation, it shows what Frankie Edgar is still capable of in this division, and I think he's still worthy of being in the top 10 for sure.
Yeah, I like it, and I agree with that. All right, guys. So more controversy. Here we go. Number 8, Marlon Moraes for me at number 8. He has been not the same since he lost to Cejudo. He's been inconsistent. He lost to Sandhagen, and I think the Sandhagen loss was really the last straw for him. I think he really needs to win in this next fight because he lost to Rob Font after that Sandhagen fight, and then the Rob Font fight, he was trying to grapple with Rob pretty much the entire time. It was weird to see. He's just not comfortable with his chin right now. Anytime he was breaking, he should be more comfortable on the stand-up than even Rob Font. And Rob Font is fantastic on the stand-up, but even a jab started to rock Marlon Moraes. Yeah. And I think a lot of that, more than just his chin being tested, is his confidence in his stand-up after being knocked out by Corey Sandhagen. He needs to brush that off, take some time off, and he can come back. And I still think he could be a very good contender in bantamweight. But right now, I see no reason to rank him higher than 8th.
Yeah, no, I get it where he's at right now. I don't even have him on my top 10 list. That'll tell you how I think of Marlon Moraes right now. I just feel like currently there's so many fighters that are doing better than him and that will do better than him. And that's why what are my number 7? Number 7, I have Dominic Cruz, the greatest of all time. He suffered 2 losses from back. These are some of the greatest people in the world that have ever fought, and he's suffering losses from them. And he came back. He beat Casey Kenny pretty well. Granted, he is looking a little bit slower out there than he used to be. That just means with old age, he needs to mix in with his wrestling a little bit more. We saw it with Dominic Cruz. We see it with Glover Teixeira. it's definitely possible that he can come back and still make that title shot picture. I could see it happening. He brings in the pay-per-views. He has fantastic style that people like to see. And he's only not ranked higher right now because the UFC is not giving him high opponents to fight here pretty soon. So number 7, I have Dominic Cruz.
Hunter, the wavelengths are coming back again. I have Dominic Cruz at number 7 too. I pretty much agree with everything you've just said. He beat a very game young Casey Kenny, who is very similar in looks to Piotr Jan, funny enough, I think.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it was a split decision that absolutely should have been unanimous all day, every day.
Really bad call. Yeah.
Super bad.
Same as Lando Venata against Mike Grundy. What in Jesus' name are these?
And it was a 30-27. That was insane.
Stupid.
Just that's a debate for another day. I'm gonna get angry at judges because we've talked about them so much. But Dominic Cruz is number 7 for me, and again, it speaks to how good Dominic Cruz is. I agree with Hunter; he is slowing up, and that is because of his style. Again, I think it was you, Jack, that nailed it with about how important his knees are, and especially his ACLs for that explosive kinetic energy, and that's why he's done so much damage to them and needed such extensive surgery and rehab. But that speaks to how good Dominic Cruz is. If all he has to do to stay ahead is dip in more to his world-class wrestling, then is that really a disadvantage to begin with? Because he's still got some of the best wrestling in the division.
Right.
And a lot of the younger guys are going to find it hard to hang with Dominic Cruz. So for me, he's worthy of being number 7.
Guys, this is a big moment. We all have Dominic Cruz at number 7 on our rankings. This is insane.
Unanimous.
Might be the first time. Well, okay, except for like number 1, number 2, number 3. This might be the first time for like a number 7 lower that we all have the same one. This is huge. Big moment. Yeah, I'm same reason. Yeah, same reason as all of you guys. I mean, Dominic Cruz, he still has so much potential. His last win over Casey Kenny, I wasn't too sure he was going to get it done. I mean, he just seems too slow to me in that Cejudo fight, and Casey Kenny has looked amazing, but he went out there and really proved a point. And again, terrible. Why did it even go to split decision? Absolutely. It was not even close. I almost had it 30. I mean, probably the last round I gave to Kenny, but I had you could argue 30-27 Dominic Cruz. The last round was close. But either way, he definitely won the fight. And he proved he still has it to challenge up there. I don't know if he can go and become champion again, but honestly, if anyone at his age could do it, it would be Dominic Cruz. And we've seen that just because of how the legendary status of him. Number 7 is the rightful spot. UFC rankings need to change it to number 7 because we all agree on it. That means something. So yeah, Dominic Cruz exactly. Dominic Cruz number 7 for me.
All right, here's where some controversy might spark up. Number 6, I have Rob Font. I think Rob Font is not as good as everyone, gets him out to be. I think Rob Font is a good fighter, and he's got a fantastic pressuring game. But let's take a look at his last 3 wins. He's on a 3-fight winning streak right now. His last win was against Marlon Moraes, who's been losing a lot of his fights lately, and he's been less confident, as already described, and just on the wrong side of these fights. And Rob Font went out there and still showed a really good performance. Then we take a look at the what was his last? The fight before that? It was Ricky Simone. Ricky Simone's not even in the top 15 right now. He's what you call a gatekeeper. Ricky Simone, he's got good tools. He's good just about everywhere. He has good stand up and he has good ground game, but nothing's great. Nothing's even elite. And Rob Font went out there and beat him. And then we take a look at his next win, which was Sergio Pettis, which I'll give him to that. Sergio Pettis is a fantastic fighter at Bantamweight. Those 3 fights alone don't, in my eyes, get you in the top 5. I think Rob Font is a good fighter, but I don't think he's good enough to be in these elite status where all these fantastic bantamweights are. And that's why I have my number 6.
Yeah, it's a very fair justification. I'm not mad at it at all, as long as it's reasoned. My number 6 is Jose Aldo. And I think, to be honest with you, sometimes I wonder whether the move to 35 was a good idea for Aldo, especially getting older. I mean, I understand why he did it, but I just sometimes think the damage is amplified much more, not only getting older, but also cutting weight. You have less muscle to actually absorb the impact of the shots that you take. But Jose Aldo's given a very good account of himself at bantamweight for the most part. I mean, he was very unfortunate against Petr Yan, and that he found out Petr Yan was basically the Terminator, because he went in with that traditional kickboxing and that Muay Thai mixture, and it all just bounced off Petr Yan like nothing had happened. Again, Petr Yan's a freak, so you can't really hold that against him. But I think even though he is approaching the twilight of his career, shall we say, I still think Jose Aldo's capable of giving a very good account of himself. But I think a lot of the guys ahead of him, he can't catch. So I think Aldo's worthy of being in that sort of in-between purgatory sort of spot. So Jose Aldo's number 6 for me.
Yeah, Keelan, we're on the same page here. I like that spot a lot for Jose Aldo. I honestly, I think the move down was a good move for him, though. His first fight was against Marlon Moraes, and that was a split decision loss. But if you remember, everyone had that fight for Jose Aldo pretty much. Even Dana White said that was for Jose Aldo, which is why he got the title shot following it and not Moraes. One of those rare instances where a loss actually plays in the other guy's favor, because he probably should have won. It was a split decision, another bad decision. UFC judges, of course. Petr Yan, I mean, Jose Aldo at his age, there's no way. And he put up a really good fight against Petr Yan. Like, I honestly thought, I didn't think he was going to be able to last that long. He probably won rounds 1 and 2 or close to. He won round 1, maybe round 2. But Petr Yan is like, he absorbs everything and then unleashes it and just is insane. But Jose Aldo did surprisingly good in that fight. And then you lose to Petr Yan, but he comes back and beats Marlon Vera pretty dominantly. So I honestly think he's one of those. He's an odd fighter, and that he will lose to the best of the best. And I do believe that's because he's his age and everything. But he'll go back and he'll still prove that he should be up there, which is why I have him at number 6, because he still will beat the guys that get him into that spot where he needs to be, not quite top 5, but just right there. And that's what he's able to do. So I'm interested to see when he fights again. And I honestly, he's not looking like he's about to lose every single fight right now. And number 6, I think, is a fair ranking for Jose Aldo. And I think he could go up or down from there, honestly.
That's fair. I feel like 5 and 6 can be interchangeable for me. I have number 5, Jose Aldo. But for these reasons, separately, the reason why he's 5 and not 6 is because he's not as old as you guys like take him out to be. He's only 34. He got the championship belt when he was so young, true. And he really did have a lot of fights. Ages him. Right, it's MMA age. You know, it's like dog years. He's been in UFC for so long. It kind of stacks on top of him. It takes probably more of a toll than a lot of other fighters. But Jose Aldo is. I thought the move down might have been a bad idea at first, and then he went out there and he showed a really good performance against Marlon Moraes. You know, I had him winning that fight like a lot of other people did. Then he goes out there and kind of gets killed by Petr Yan, but Petr Yan is, like Keelan said, the Terminator. You know, everything Jose tried throwing at him just would not work. It did not have an effect on him, which was just scary to watch. It still is scary because Aljamain tried doing the same thing and nothing had an effect on him. He's a whole other beast. But I have Jose Aldo at 5 because I think Jose could beat Rob Font if they were to ever fight. That's just the only reason I have him above him in that case. I think Jose Aldo was one of the best featherweight champions of all time. I think he can still do really well down here at bantamweight. I don't think he can get the title shot, or not the title shot, but just the title in general. Yeah. But I think he can definitely stay relevant in this weight division. So that is why he is at my number 5.
Man, I am wondering if I've put my number 5 too high. I really am. And I'm sort of debating putting him back a bit, but because I've got him on there, I'll tough it out and I will say who I have at number 5. The reason I have this guy at number 5 is that I think he's good enough to beat everybody else from 6 to 10 if they were to fight. My number 5 is Sean O'Malley.
Boom! No, bro. I love it. I like it. You're braver than me. I would have put him pretty high too.
Are you serious right now? No way.
Just hear me out.
No way. Are you
again? Man. I see. The thing is, I was kind of very, very strongly debating this pick within myself.
Oh my god!
I'm going to stick with O'Malley at number 5, but under a couple of conditions. And the conditions are these. First of all, he has to accept that he lost to Chito Vera because that's getting embarrassing now. Less of a shock. Come on, let's be real here. The second condition is I know he's fighting. I can't even remember who he's fighting next, but you're right. It's not a ranked opponent. His next fight after this fight has to be against someone from around 11 or 12 at the very least. If it's anything non ranked, I would take him out of number 5 because he has to start fighting real opponents now. I fully accept that that is a valid criticism, but I believe in O'Malley's talent. I believe in what we've seen from him, and I believe in his ability. He comes out with that karate stance. He's an excellent pressure fighter. And I think if you look at who I have from 6 to 10, Aldo, Cruz, Edgar, Sunsao, and Devashvili, if you were to put those guys in the octagon with O'Malley tomorrow, who would you bet on to win those fights? Because I would bet O'Malley to win them on his ability. So again, I understand it's a split decision here at MMA Island, but I'm going to tough it out. And for now, I will have Sean O'Malley at number 5. All right,
Oh,
kill
man.
me, Jack. Just
Oh,
finish
man.
me.
See, I don't think he would beat. Okay, maybe your list, but not my list. I think he would lose to Devashvili. Maybe Frankie Edgar. He might beat Frankie Edgar. I think he would lose to Jose Aldo. Dominic Cruz is up in the air. Maybe Dominic Cruz because his chin's not there and he's slower. But I think Dominic Cruz could put up a good fight. I think he would beat Marlon Moraes. I don't know. I would not put him that high. And just because he would beat those guys doesn't mean he deserves that ranking for me, because he hasn't proven that he can beat someone up there. Now,
I do agree with that.
Do I think he would beat Marlon Vera if he rematched him? Yes. Do I think he has all of the potential in the world? Yes, but he hasn't proven it yet, which is why I can't put him up there. As much as I would love to see him up there, I can't put him up there. And until he starts getting offered or accepting these big fights, I can't even consider putting him up there. Bold, though. And when, I was not expecting that big of a change in here, so it's fascinating. Well, my number 5 is boring compared to that. I have Rob Font. It is still a very interesting one, though, considering this main event. He is ranked number 3 in the official UFC's rankings. But along with Hunter's kind of opinion, I kind of follow suit with it. I do think he should be top 5 because I judge a lot of his wins based off of also he's beaten some really good contenders, but also he's been getting tremendously better every single time he fights as well. He almost looks like a complete new fighter every single time he steps in there. And yes, even though Marlon Moraes, I do completely agree and argue actually for that he beat a not 100% Marlon Moraes, but that is still a big victory. Just like beating Tony Ferguson for Beneil Dariush is a big victory, and that will get him up there. So yeah, I have Rob Font number 5. I don't think he should be number 3. Just the guys I have above him in the UFC's ranking in my rankings. I don't really see how he can be higher than them based off of opponents beat alone. And my number 4 will be pretty controversial because of that. But Rob Font number 5, not Sean O'Malley.
That's fair. I like Sean O'Malley, and that's why I put him at number 10. I would have loved to put him higher because I do believe that what Keelan said, there's some truth behind it. I think he can beat a lot of those people. It's just he hasn't yet. So that's why I put him at 10. I think that's a good spot for him. My number 4, Keelan will not like. I have TJ Dillashaw at number 4. I think TJ Dillashaw is one of the best bantamweights to live currently. I think yes, he had his problems he definitely shot up a little bit. But we got to see what his next performance leads. That's why he's not higher right now. I think he definitely has the ability to be higher. We just got to see his next performance to see if it really was the PEDs that was taking over, or if it was his natural ability. A lot of fighters you don't really know in between, because we take a look at John Jones right now. Yes, he did PEDs, but he came back and he's still fighting hard and he's still fighting strong and he's still basically undefeated. And I think TJ Dillashaw could be that case as well, because a lot of fighters when they like finish with PEDs, they look at bad and they perform bad. I don't think TJ Dillashaw will be one of those people. I think he's young, and I think he will be able to come back on top of the bantamweight division. I don't think he'll become champion again, but I think he can stay in that top 4 spot for quite some time once he starts fighting again. Number 4, TJ Dillashaw.
Interesting arguments. Fair enough, yeah. My number 4 is Rob Font. And I believe in the font. I do. The fountain of youth. I don't know. Make of that headline what you will. I think there's some very real hype behind Rob Font, and I'm with it. I think he's an excellent pressure fighter. And whilst I do think his opponent, Cody Garbrandt, is going to beat him, that is my prediction. I think Rob Font's going to make a very tough test of it. I think he's got some very, very good wrestling behind him, which, of course, in this division especially is key in a wealth of strikers. But also he's got hands. You know, his stand-up has developed so much in such little time. I think it shows as well the growth that Rob Font has, the potential in the future. And I certainly think he's within striking distance of being a UFC champion in his future for sure. I do think he is that talented. I understand some of the arguments that were made that people perhaps aren't on the hype, and I understand that. I'm just saying, when it comes to Rob Font, I think you're either half glass full or half glass empty based on what we've seen of him. I teeter towards half glass full just because of what I think I can see, but I'm not mad at the criticisms either. They're all very valid. Now, on that basis, Rob Font's number 4 for me, but a lot of that is dependent on how he does against Cody as well. So, Rob Font, at the moment, you're number 4.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay. So, seeing as how this has gone, my number 4, I don't think either of you will have on your list. But I stand by it, and he is one of my favorite guys at 135. So this is another controversial one. This is definitely the craziest.
It can't be any worse than
one.
mine.
It's okay. One of my favorite guys at 135, and a guy that I feel keeps getting better and has all the potential in the world as well. And he's still young, but has actually beaten some top contenders. Pedro Munoz at number 4. Now I know it's very, very, very high, but I was doing a lot of research, and I really don't see how Rob Font would be above him. Now I know Rob Font is on more momentum, and Pedro Munoz is coming off a win over Jimmy Rivera, which is not the most outstanding win, but Jimmy Rivera is still a good fighter. He's number 12, and he still has a very dangerous game. He lost a close split decision to Frankie Edgar. I do agree with the decision. Frankie Edgar won, but it was very close, and a lot of people were arguing for Pedro Munoz. He went to a decision with Aljamain Sterling. Here's the thing about Pedro Munoz. He never loses by finish. He has faced the toughest of the tough in that division and has only lost by decision. Before that, he beat Cody Garbrandt by knockout, which I value very highly, even though that was on Cody Garbrandt's spell whenever he was losing. That's still a win over Cody Garbrandt by knockout. The win over Jimmy Rivera showed a lot, and not only was a big unanimous decision over Jimmy Rivera, but it showed that Pedro Munoz was actually on a complete other level than Jimmy Rivera, which is something that you need to see in the top contender. I think his list is more impressive than Rob Font's. I think he has more potential, and I think he can go further, closer to a title shot than all of the guys I have ranked below him, which is why I ranked him so high. And that's kind of for the reason he's not on the hottest streak right now, but he has all the potential to go on the hottest streak. And based off his last performance, I think he's riding a lot of momentum, and I think he beats maybe only one or two guys, but I think only loses to one or two guys, but beats everybody else below my list. That's why I have Pedro Munoz at number 4. That's I guess, the equivalent of the Sean O'Malley pick on this one. That's very controversial, but I believe in Pedro Munoz, and I have him ranked very high.
You know, I kind of disagreed with you for a little bit, and then I heard your reasoning, and that's the same reasoning I
at least understand
for Rob Font. I could totally understand
it,
and I don't hate it because I think Pedro Munoz, if you have the ability to knock out Cody Garbrandt, you should definitely be high on the list. And I'm kind of kicking myself in the butt right now because I'm thinking to myself, man, I should have put him on the list somewhere. I'd probably put him around 6 or 7 if I could change up my list again. But that's a good shout. I like it. I don't think he should be that high, but I don't disagree with it. My number 3 might get Keelan fired up here too. Corey Sandhagen.
Oh,
I think Corey Sandhagen is very, 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 very good. And I think that he can be in the number 3 position for a very long time. But I don't think he has what it takes to become champion right now. I think he got submitted by Aljamain Sterling the first round, which you know what? Granted, it was a very quick submission. It's hard to get out of, and Aljamain Sterling's got an anaconda choke, put anyone to sleep. And then he goes out there and he knocks out Marlon Moraes with a spinning back kick, which was beautiful. And then he knocks Frankie Edgar out cold. But we take a look at his last two opponents, Marlon Moraes and Frankie Edgar. Those people are pretty low on my list right now. Just because he hasn't fought anyone super duper high currently, I'm having my number 3. Just because also I don't think he can beat my number 1 or 2. Those are really my only reasons why I don't have him higher, because I don't think he can beat my number 1 and 2. So I love Corey Sandhagen. I think he has what it takes to be very high in this division. I think even a move up in the weight division could be very beneficial to him. But I think he will only stay here at number 3 for the rest of his career if he chooses to stay in bantamweight. That is my hot take.
Ooh.
Yeah, all right. It's kind of a shot in the heart, right? It's like I love to see him, but
kind of hurts my soul a little. I'm not gonna lie. Ladies and gentlemen, for me, number 3, Cody Garbrandt. I mean, I think he's an absolute stud. I really do, and it's not really a shock, but it's kind of a shock. TJ's not on my list, and I think he did one of the most unprofessional things you could do in letting a fighter go on a slide like that, knowing what we know now, but that's a conversation for a different day. When Cody Garbrandt has his head screwed on, he can knock out every single top 10 bantamweight that there is, and I don't think that's even disputable. His Rafael Assunção win is one of the most beautiful technical knockouts you will ever see, baiting him into the hook, ducking, bang. On the buzzer just compounds it, but the skill alone just stands on its own merit. You know, Cody Garbrandt won the title when he was 27 years old, I believe, against Dominic Cruz, yada, yada, yada. So he's the only real top 10 outside of Aldo that I can see who has actual championship pedigree recently in any real division. I mean, that alone puts him in the top 4. But for top 3, I just think he can knock out any top 10 there. His resume stands for itself. And as I've said before, his losing streak that, of course, included Pedro Munoz, reading it in paper does not do it justice in real life.
That's very true.
You know, again, I take nothing away from Pedro Munoz. I like him a lot as well. And if I had to do my list again, I'd probably take Assunção out and put Munoz at number 9. That's probably where I'd have put him. But the knockout with Garbrandt, fantastic as it was, only happened because Garbrandt tried to prove a point. If Garbrandt had actually moved his head even an inch to the left, most of the punches wouldn't have gotten through, but it was a knockout. We're not going to take it away from him. Cody Garbrandt with his head screwed on is an unbelievably dangerous weapon, and I think he does have his head screwed on. He's number 3 for me.
Yeah, I'm on the exact same page as you. I think this shows how highly we all value Cody Garbrandt and how highly he should be valued, considering, yes, he was on a 3-fight losing streak, and he just beat Rafael Assunção, who's not an extremely top contender, but because he got his momentum back, he's ranked number 3 in our list, and Hunter will have him higher than that. So that just shows you how high we actually value him, and how much he can present in the sport. TJ Dillashaw losses are both questionable. Both haven't been proven either way, but they're most likely TJ Dillashaw was using the performance-enhancing drugs. Pedro Munoz, following that, I still give Pedro Munoz a lot of credit for winning that fight, but again, it's still a part of that losing streak, which you're absolutely correct about, and we've said multiple times on this podcast, and I agree. Assunção, he got his streak back. He's back. He's back. Cody Garbrandt is back. You could feel the energy. He needed that win. That win was so necessary, not only just for his confidence, but his career was really on the line there. You've also said that multiple times, Keelan, that was a legitimate moment in his career. If he loses that, who knows? Honestly, who knows where we'd be talking right now? But after that win, such a knockout too. It was really, if Buckley didn't exist, that would have been knockout of the year, unquestionably. And honestly, I don't think it's not debatable between that Buckley knockout, just because of all the technique that was involved with it and the timing and everything right before the buzzer too, just adds on to everything. And literally the last minute shot was amazing. And he's back, and I'm so excited to see it. And I really do have a lot of faith in Garbrandt. I cannot put him above Sandhagen. I think Sandhagen has time and time again proven that he is the number 1 contender. Well, I guess nothing, but I'll expand on that in a little bit. But yeah, taking nothing away, Cody Garbrandt. I'm excited to see him this weekend. It feels like the fights are tomorrow for some reason. We're doing this right now. It feels like the fights are tomorrow. They need to hurry up. But yeah, Cody Garbrandt number 3 for me, and that's a very good ranking for a very good fighter.
Yeah, for number 2, I have Cody Garbrandt. The biggest problem with Cody Garbrandt's game was not his striking ability, was not his wrestling ability, his mental ability. It was how young he was. Now that he's getting older, I feel like that's going to help him out so much. You know, I feel like he's a whole other fighter. Those knockouts happened years ago. Like really, like those happened a long time ago. I'm sure he's been training so much. Everyone calls him Cody 2.0 for a reason. You know, he's looking sharp. He looks good. He doesn't look overzealous when he gets someone hurt. You know, he hurt Rafael Assunção in that second round. You know, he knocked him down, but he didn't jump on him. He was smart about it. He's like, you know, I'm going to take my time. I know I can pick him apart. And he ended up getting one of the best knockouts of 2020. I mean, I hate to plug myself, but go check out my article. I made a list of the top 5 knockouts of 2020. Of course, number 1 was Joaquin Buckley, but number 2, spoiler alert, Cody Garbrandt. This was really the resurgence of his career that he needed and this momentum he's going to build up. And dare I say, I believe that Cody Garbrandt will be the next double champion. He almost got he had a shot at the flyweight belt, got hurt. He got a shoulder injury, got hurt, pulled him out of the fight. Then Deiveson Figueiredo went on to have one of the greatest fights of all time in the flyweight division. But if he wins his fight against Rob Font, he'll be a contender in both flyweight and bantamweight, which is unheard of right now. It reminds me of BJ Penn. You know, he went back and forth between lightweight and welterweight, but I believe that this can happen too with Cody Garbrandt. I think so high of Cody Garbrandt. I think he's definitely one of my favorite fighters because I might have a little bit biased here, but I view him very high and I put Cody Garbrandt number 2.
My number 2 is very interesting, and it's going to start controversy. And I have 2 big reasons for why it's number 2. My number 2 is Petr Yan. And the silence says everything.
This is insane. This is the craziest one.
I saw this coming. You know, I know
as soon as he said that.
I feel like I've heard Keelan talk big about Sandhagen. I'm like, oh yeah, he's going to.
Technically, I have 3 reasons, but I have 2 main reasons.
All right, go for it.
My first reason for Petr Yan being number 2 is that I actually want to do the excellent hunter tactic, and we're going to look at who he's actually fought.
Okay.
I feel this is almost getting overlooked in the midst of the Yan hype. Past his peak, Uriah Faber. Quite frankly, I retired Uriah Faber. A Jose Aldo, who's over the hill as well, quite frankly. You know, he's making his last run at 135. I always thought Yan was going to win that anyway. And then one of the most disgraceful, blatant knees I've ever seen in my life in Aljamain Sterling. He didn't need to do it. He was going to win dominantly. And he, quite frankly, decided to take a cheap shot and he thought he'd get away with it. My second reason is this. Petr Yan gets hit very easily. And this is, again, something people are glossing over a lot because he takes shots well, but he gets hit a lot and he gets hit very easily. His defense is very porous. And quite frankly, Cody Garbrandt, I think, would knock his head off if he connected with a punch. I really do believe that. I'm perfectly serious. And yeah, I think Petr Yan is an incredible fighter. I think he's very well-rounded. I think he is as strong as anything. But I really I don't think he merits being my number 1. I really don't. I think he had his chance at defending his belt against Aljamain, and he took a cheap shot that he didn't need to take. And to me, that taints my image of Petr Yan. We went into a massive debate about this, about the rules and everything else, but it does taint my image of Petr Yan because you're meant to know the rules. But for me, Petr Yan is number 2. I don't think the caliber of opponent he's faced is fantastic, with the exception of Aljamain. And I think a lot of the elite strikers at 135 would actually put him in real trouble.
Ooh, that's interesting. So we all have mixed matched top ones. This is crazy. We keep going. I like it. That's interesting. Okay, Sandhagen, first off, is my number 2, right? Which is it's different for reasons. Sandhagen would be the number 1 contender had the whole UFC title debacle not happened with the illegal knee from Petr Yan. And that is one of my major points why I have Petr Yan as number one. And I won't go too far into it because I have to explain, obviously, Petr Yan is number one, is that, yes, he did throw that illegal knee, but he is one of the guys on here that was champion. And what he was doing to Aljamain Sterling going into that fight, I picked Aljamain Sterling to win, but he absolutely was destroying him, like picking him apart in every single way you could do it. He was out wrestling Aljamain Sterling. He was out striking Aljamain Sterling. He was picking him apart at his own game. It was crazy to see. And that alone, I think, almost not eliminates the argument about the fights, because that is important. But at the very top of the championship level, Petr Yan did prove that he was the best of the best and lost his title because of the illegal knee. Besides the point, Corey Sandhagen would be the number one contender had Petr Yan remained champion. I was talking to Hunter about this earlier, and Keelan too, before we went on. I don't think Aljamain Sterling would be ridiculously high on any of our lists because of that title fight. And I think Sandhagen beats Aljamain Sterling in a rematch. He got caught, just like people get caught on the feet by a knockout. He got caught with a submission. Aljamain Sterling is one of the best in the game at doing submissions, and he got caught. I don't think that happens again. I don't know if we've seen a contender this young improve so fast and so quickly in a span of not even a year. After the Aljamain Sterling fight, he knocked out Marlon Moraes with the spinning wheel kick, and that was Marlon Moraes coming off of a win. So Marlon Moraes was regaining confidence there, and Sandhagen just picked him apart. Then obviously that Frankie Edgar knockout. Oh my word, that was incredible. That flying knee was incredible. Had my jaw to the floor. All the other wins that he's had just continues to get better. He's finishing. Before he was going on a couple of decisions. Now he's finishing people. He is the clear number one contender. He shouldn't even have to fight this TJ Dillashaw fight coming up, but he is because of the whole title mess, which is unfortunate for him. But number two, Corey Sandhagen, and I think that's pretty clear as far as the way I see it.
That's fair. My number one, I have Petr Yan. I feel like Petr Yan is most definitely should be the number one contender. I feel like everyone knows he won that Aljamain Sterling fight. Like when we look down on it, actually, the illegal knee is heartbreaking to see on both sides here, because you didn't need to see Aljamain Sterling get even more hurt than he was in that fight.
Yeah. But
that kind of also proves something, not just the knee, but the win over, or what we really see is the win over Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling, as much as we try to say it won't happen again, it did happen. Aljamain Sterling submitted Corey Sandhagen, and it was in the first round, and it wasn't like it was super long ago. It wasn't like it was 2 or 3 years ago. No, this was still, it hasn't even been a year since it happened. I think it happened in June. This is a recent loss to Corey Sandhagen here, and that's why I don't have him as a number one contender. I mean, Aljamain Sterling just recently beat him. I know everyone says that if it happens again, it won't happen, or if the fight were to happen again, that wouldn't happen. But how do we know that for sure? Aljamain Sterling's a crafty fighter, and he really can put those submissions out of nowhere. We just know that it's not going to happen against Petr Yan, because Petr Yan is that good of a fighter. He truly is the champion right now, even though Aljamain Sterling's holding the title for him. Petr Yan, number one contender.
Yeah, no one's going to be shocked to think who my number one contender is. It's my boy, Corey Sandhagen. I think Corey Sandhagen is special, and I think he is a once-in-a-generational talent when you actually consider his skill set and how good he is. You know, again, we talk about knockouts of the year for the year 2021. Sandhagen Edgar is going to be up there.
Oh, yeah.
You know, to jump as tall as a human being just to get your knee to their head to knock them out tells you how good Corey Sandhagen is. And, you know, I've waxed lyrical about Corey Sandhagen a lot. I don't think I have to do that much more because people know how highly I value him. But one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to compare Sandhagen's resume to Petr Yan's in the UFC. And quite frankly, Sandhagen's trounces all over Petr Yan's. Not only is there more, but there's better quality. Frankie Edgar, Marlon Moraes, we talked about that ridiculous spinning kick. He did lose the submission to Aljamain Sterling, but Sterling's known for that jiu-jitsu with Matt Serra on Long Island. It really is his bread and butter. Rafael Assunção beat him. John Lineker, Hands of Stone, beat him. Bautista beat him. So, I mean, Corey Sandhagen has the resume to back up everything I'm saying about him. This isn't just some, 1 or 2 fight hype train. the hype's real with Corey Sandhagen. His talent is very, very rarely going to be matched by anybody. I think his kickboxing makes him nearly untouchable, and I think he's vastly underestimated on the ground too. And one advantage Corey Sandhagen's going to have with the loss to Aljamain Sterling is that people are going to underestimate him on the ground now, and they're going to be in for a very, very nasty surprise. Because, I mean, I'm not just saying this because I picked Corey Sandhagen and because I drafted him. I actually think Jack made a really good point. Whenever it's very early into a fight and both fighters have like 100% stamina and no one's really taken a hit, it is very easy to get caught in things, whether it's a wild overhand or whether it's a scramble on the ground that turns into a submission. It's easier to happen than people think. And I think Sandhagen took that loss very well. And more importantly, he learned a lot from it. So I actually think his loss is only going to make him a more complete fighter. And if we were to put which we should be putting right now, with the exception of this goddamn title debacle, if we put Petr Yan and Corey Sandhagen on like main eventing a title card, my money's on Corey Sandhagen. And that's no disrespect to Petr Yan because he is a fantastic fighter. I just think Sandhagen is so well-rounded. He presents so many problems and he will catch Yan with something.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that. I like that you mentioned that they got caught early, with the Corey Sandhagen thing. But the thing is, I think that Aljamain Sterling's stand-up got more exposed than Corey Sandhagen's ground game after the recent fights, and the reason is because he fought Petr Yan, which is why I have him at number one. It comes full circle there. Petr Yan just absolutely dismantled him. And it's so unfortunate what happened, and it absolutely is on Petr Yan for throwing that knee. But it is what it is. Honestly, I am the biggest Corey Sandhagen fan. You guys rank Cody Garbrandt so high. It's actually crazy. I love Cody Garbrandt. I do rank him very high. Number 3 shows that. But to become a double champ, I don't think so. And I think just becoming champ at this point is a tall order. I don't think he gets past Corey Sandhagen. That's another debate for another time.
What a fight, though.
That would be amazing. Wouldn't that be amazing? Especially if it was for a title. Okay. Anyways, but Petr Yan is the most well-rounded 135er at the moment. I really do believe that at what we just saw. And my biggest point is that he did all of that at that championship level. And I do think Corey Sandhagen is on that championship level, just like a couple other guys, Max Holloway, Robert Whittaker, that I think are on that championship level as well that aren't champions. But Petr Yan's proven that he can do it in an actual championship fight 2 times. 2 very good opponents. Say what you will about Jose Aldo, he is still out there getting wins even at his age and is still one of the toughest guys. And yeah, Petr Yan, you can even say he eats a lot of shots, but a lot of that is his defense too. It looks like he's eating a lot of shots because he stands there like this, but he stands like this. He's really blocking a lot of them, and that's why he can absorb so many. He's eating so many big shots, and then he tires out his opponents and then pours it all on. I love Petr Yan, and the only guy in the entire UFC bantamweight division and the entire world of bantamweight I would rank above Corey Sandhagen right now is Petr Yan. And it's for that reason. And obviously the last reason is too, and probably the most important, he's on my fantasy team, right? So I got to support my guy. I got to support my guy becoming champ again. So, but yeah, honestly, and for real though, I do have Petr Yan above Corey Sandhagen. I would love to see that matchup in the future. Once the whole thing works out. If Aljamain Sterling does beat Petr Yan again though, like if he actually beats him, which I don't think any of us are actually considering, how insane would that be? Because then you would probably have a Corey Sandhagen, assuming he beats TJ Dillashaw, versus Aljamain Sterling rematch for the belt, which is something no one's really considering because of how badly Petr Yan won that first time. But bantamweight's crazy, and I think all of our rankings and everything right here proved it. Yeah. So with that, we have an amazing main event this Saturday: Cody Garbrandt versus Rob Font. Prediction time. Hunter, get us started.
It's no surprise for me that I'm picking Cody Garbrandt. I feel like Rob Font's style of fighting plays perfectly into Cody Garbrandt's. Rob Font does fantastic on the blitzes, and he has a fantastic jab that everyone talks about. But Cody Garbrandt thrives when his opponent blitzes. He almost slows it down in his mind. He sees where the punches are going. He knows which strike to throw next. And his footwork on top of it is immaculate. You know, he can get out of the way just in time for him to throw a left hook or a right hook to put down Rob Font. And I feel like this is going to happen pretty early on. This is going to be a statement fight. This is going to show that Cody Garbrandt is meant for the title shot next. He wants it. He thinks he's one of the best in the division. He's going to get it. I think Cody Garbrandt, first round knockout.
Yeah, I have to agree. I really do. I don't, and again, I like Rob Font. My rankings reflect how highly I think of him, but I don't think there's a single area that I think Rob Font bests Cody Garbrandt in.
Yeah.
I think in wrestling, Garbrandt's superior. I think in striking, Garbrandt is planets ahead of Rob Font. Yep. And I think he is going to catch him and he's going to hurt him very, very badly too. You know, it's actually a point I was going to make, but I think Hunter said it absolutely better than I could. You know, against any other fighter, the blitz tactic works perfectly because fighters get overwhelmed, they block up, and they don't know what to do. You can't do that against Cody Garbrandt because he loves blitz fighters. The Dominic Cruz fight proved it. All his other fights proved it too. You know, if you come in throwing wild hooks, Cody Garbrandt's going to get out of the way and he's going to blast your head into the 6th row with a left hook or a right hook. That's what he does. That's why he's so good. And I think that's how this fight's going to go. Because as much as I love Rob Font, he is a one-dimensional fighter too, for the most part. Cody Garbrandt is the definition of versatility. He can bring the fight anywhere and he will thrive very well. And I think Hunter, again, summed it up perfectly. This is going to be a statement fight for Cody Garbrandt. This is almost going to be Cody Garbrandt kicking the door down and saying, what did you forget about me? That's how I see this going. I think Rob Font's going to shoot in on the blitz or on the takedown. And I think Cody Garbrandt's going to land a vicious hook that ends this fight, 1st or 2nd round.
Yep. I agree. The bottom line for me in this fight is not Pedro Munoz. Rob Font is one of his best strengths is his boxing, and you cannot outbox Cody Garbrandt. At least in this division, no one can outbox Cody Garbrandt, and that's what it's going to come down to. Pedro Munoz is going to go forward just like Hunter and Keelan, you alluded to as well, and Cody Garbrandt's going to catch him. I think Cody Garbrandt, though, I think this fight just fits so perfectly for him because this is a new version of Cody Garbrandt. We are potentially looking at an even better version of Cody Garbrandt than when he was the champion because he's patient. He's showing his patience now. He's calm. He's fixed those mental demons. And if we see that version that we saw against the Sun Sal against Font, it's gonna be a really good fight for Cody Garbrandt. I think that Rob Font is extremely tough. He rarely is finished. I don't know the exact stats on it. He might have never been.
He's been submitted once, never been knocked out in the UFC.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So he's very, very, very tough, which is why I think a patient Garbrandt is going to let Rob Font come forward, maybe land a couple of jabs or whatever, but he's going to be there countering, and he is the faster, stronger boxer. Cody Garbrandt is. So I think this is going to be a war, and I think Cody Garbrandt's just going to wear Rob Font down, and I think around the 3rd round, it's just going to be too much. 3rd round TKO, Cody Garbrandt wins. Big statement. And this bantamweight division just gets even crazier.
Yeah, I agree. And for the viewers at home, I want you guys to really look at the footwork in this fight. You guys are going to be absolutely amazed by Cody Garbrandt's footwork, but let alone Rob Font's footwork too. Yep. I think both of these fighters have been studying each other for a while now. I think Rob Font, his jab itself is always said to be so good now. And you saw it against Marlon Moraes' fight. You know, a jab knocked back Marlon Moraes. And that's no knock on Marlon Moraes, or not that much of a knock. I just think that the power behind Rob Font is not to be joked about. I wouldn't be surprised if Cody Garbrandt got caught in this fight too. You know, I can see it going either way. I just feel like I have more I could be able to see the Garbrandt knockout happening more than I could see the Font knockout happening. But still, I wouldn't count any of these fighters out. Footwork is going to be amazing. No one's ever finished Font, so it's going to be definitely a sight to be seen if it does happen. Not finished. No one's ever knocked out Font. He got submitted a while ago. But yeah, make sure to keep an eye out for this fight. This is going to be going under the radar because it's a fight week after a UFC pay-per-view. There's plenty of good fights on this card, so make sure to watch the whole thing, and you guys will not be disappointed.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Hunter said there in terms of technical things, what to watch out for, I'm going to say this especially for Garbrandt because he does it so well. watch Cody Garbrandt's body positioning and his hand positioning. If you look at his body, he's semi-crouched all the time, and that's because he's so good at wrestling and so good at boxing. So whenever he's crouched with his hands almost forward a little, he's able to generate the full power on every strike he throws, and that's why his boxing is so elite. He never stands up fully and has to wind back to generate power. He's always in that position, and that's why he's a nightmare for so many opponents that he faces. And when you combine that with the footwork that Hunter's just mentioned, you get a nightmare opponent, because not only can you not hit him, but he's always in the position to just blow you out of the water. So, and again, I fully agree with what Hunter's just said there. Don't sleep on this fight, because the implications for the 135 division are seismic this weekend. If Cody Garbrandt wins, then you kind of have a fatal four-way for the Bantamweight title. I mean, we kind of have Aljamain Sterling. He's obviously in rehab now. You have Sandhagen, who shouldn't have to fight Dillashaw. I do agree with Jack. You have Petr Yan, and we could have a fourth entrant in Cody Garbrandt. At this point, we might have to get a Hell in a Cell and just let them all fight it out, because I can't draw a line between any of them with the exception of Sterling, really. So definitely look out for that this weekend and watch this fight card, because it's so important for the division.
Yes, couldn't have said it better. I'm not even going to break it down technically because you guys did that perfectly. This fight, and the last thing is I'm going to say too is they are both going to put it on show. Rob Font and Cody Garbrandt, the one thing they do is not disappoint. They will fight, and this fight is going to be amazing. And let's not forget the co-main event, Yan Chaonan versus Carlos Esparza, and we have Jack Hermanson versus Edmund Shabazian opening up the card too. It's a stacked fight night. We're being treated, especially right after a pay-per-view, so it's going to be an amazing fight night. And this was an amazing podcast. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. Please make sure to go ahead and like and subscribe on YouTube. Listen to us everywhere, including iTunes and Spotify. Please make sure to go ahead and follow us on Instagram at MMA.island and check out all of our work, Hunter's work especially. He just mentioned it on this one, at MMAisland.net. Again, thank you, everyone, so much for listening. Great podcast, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody.